He didn't even look at her properly. The man in the tailored blue suit stood in front of the massive steel safe, sunlight pouring in from the glass walls behind him. The city below looked small, just like the people in it, especially her. She was standing near the door, clutching the straps of her worn-out backpack. Thin shoes, faded jacket, hair tied back in a way that said she'd learned to stay invisible. The man smirked. "Do you know what's inside this safe?" he asked, tapping the keypad with one finger. She shook her head slowly. $500 million, he said loudly, so the assistants behind him could hear. A few of them laughed. More money than you'll ever see in 10 lifetimes. He leaned closer, eyes sharp with arrogance. "Tell you what," he said mockingly. "If you can open it, if you can even guess the code, I'll give you all of it." Someone snorted. The girl didn't smile, didn't flinch, didn't beg. Instead, she looked at the safe. And then, she looked at him. Quietly, she said, "You shouldn't joke about things you don't understand." The room went silent. The man laughed louder. "Did you hear that? She's giving me advice now." He stepped aside and gestured dramatically. "Go on, open it. Surprise me." She took one step forward. That was when everything began to change. But before we go any further, if you enjoy powerful stories about pride, karma, and shocking twists that no one sees coming, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. These stories only get deeper, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The girl raised her hand toward the keypad. Her fingers hovered for just a moment. The man was still smiling. He wouldn't be smiling in 10 seconds, to be continued.
The room felt different the moment the girl stepped closer to the safe. Not louder, not quieter, heavier. The CEO Marcus Hale folded his arms across his chest, still amused, still convinced. This was nothing more than entertainment before lunch. Around him stood his assistants, two security guards, and a senior legal advisor who looked mildly uncomfortable but said nothing. The girl stood barely 5 feet tall. From this close, Marcus could see the frayed edges of her backpack straps, the scuffed toes of her shoes, the way she held herself like someone used to being ignored. "What's your name?" he asked casually. She didn't answer. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Cat got your tongue." "My name doesn't matter," she said calmly. Her voice wasn't weak. It wasn't bold either. It was steady, like someone who had learned not to waste words. Marcus chuckled. "Of course it doesn't." She stepped directly in front of the keypad now. The safe towered over her, black steel, biometric locks, reinforced hinges, one of the most secure vaults in the city, maybe the country. Marcus had paid a fortune for it. "You've got 10 seconds, he said, glancing at his watch. "After that, we're done playing." She nodded. 5 seconds passed in silence. Marcus expected her to start guessing numbers randomly, to hesitate, to look nervous. She did none of that. Instead, she leaned in slightly, studying the keypad, not the numbers, but the wear on them, the faint smudges, the subtle discoloration that only appeared under certain light. Marcus noticed her eyes moving, not darting, not panicked but methodical. That irritated him. "Time's ticking," he said sharply. "I know," she replied. 7 seconds. She lifted her hand and pressed the first number. A soft beep echoed through the room. Marcus froze just for a fraction of a second. "That's cute," he said quickly. "Beginner's luck." She pressed the second number. Another beep. The room had gone completely silent now. One of the assistants swallowed hard. 9 seconds. Marcus felt a flicker of something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Annoyance. She pressed the third number. Beep. The safe paused. Then, a low mechanical hum filled the room. The screen flashed. Code accepted. The lock disengaged. The safe door shifted slightly with a heavy metallic click. For a moment, no one moved. Marcus stared at the safe, his mind struggling to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. "That's not possible," he said slowly. The girl stepped back. "I told you," she said quietly. "You shouldn't joke about things you don't understand." The room erupted. What the hell just happened? Did someone leak the code? Check the system now. Marcus felt his chest tighten. His heart was pounding not with fear, but with something far worse. Loss of control. He rushed forward and grabbed the handle, yanking the safe open. Inside were stacks of documents, sealed cases, digital drives, and behind them rows of secured cash reserves. Everything was intact. Nothing was missing, which somehow made it worse. He turned sharply toward the girl. "Who are you?" She met his gaze without blinking. "I used to clean offices," she said. "Late nights, early mornings." Marcus scoffed. "You expect me to believe that? You changed your code 6 months ago." She continued. "After the board meeting in Zurich, you were angry that night." Marcus's face drained of color. "How? You always press the same 3 numbers when you're stressed," she said. "Not the code, the elevator buttons, the coffee machine, your phone." She paused. "You don't even realize you do it." The legal advisor stepped forward, pale. "Mr. Hale, this is a security breach." Marcus barely heard him. "You were watching me?" Marcus demanded. "No," she replied. "I was invisible." That word hit harder than any accusation. Marcus took a step closer. "What do you want?" For the first time, the girl hesitated. Not out of fear, out of weight. "I didn't come here for money," she said. "I came because you mocked me." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You opened my safe. You humiliated me in my own building. And you say you didn't want money." She looked him straight in the eyes. "I wanted you to understand something." "What?" he snapped. "That people like me," she said slowly, "are not as powerless as you think." The security guards shifted uneasily. Marcus clenched his jaw. "You think this ends here?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "This is where it starts." She turned toward the door. Marcus called out, "Stop her." The guards didn't move. They were staring at the safe, at the open door, at the truth standing in front of them. Marcus realized something terrifying in that moment. He had offered $500 million as a joke. And now, he was about to lose something far more valuable. The elevator doors slid shut behind her, but the tension she left behind stayed in the room. Storm clouds. Marcus Hale stood frozen, staring at the open safe. The hum of the mechanism still echoed faintly in his ears, as if mocking him. Around him, his staff whispered urgently, phones already in their hands, security protocols being discussed in hushed, panicked tones. But Marcus heard none of it. All he could hear was her voice. "I was invisible." He slammed the safe door shut with a force that made everyone flinch. "Find her," he said coldly. "Now." The head of security hesitated. "Sir, she didn't break any laws, technically." Marcus spun on him. "She opened my safe. She didn't take anything." The lawyer interjected carefully. "And you invited her to try." Marcus clenched his fists. He hated when words were used against him, especially his own. "Then tell me who she is," he snapped. "Because no one walks into my building, cracks my vault, and disappears." 2 hours later, Marcus sat alone in his office. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass wall. Steel, lights, power. A world he had built brick by brick. A world where nothing surprised him anymore. Until today. On his desk lay a thin manila folder. No name on the tab. Just a single word written in pen. "Cleaning staff. Night shift." Marcus opened it. Inside were employment records from 3 different cleaning companies. Temporary contracts. Short-term placements. All ending quietly. And there she was. A grainy ID photo from 5 years ago. Younger. Thinner. Eyes already carrying too much. Name, Eliza Moore. Age, 19 then. Position, temporary night cleaner. Hale Financial Tower. Marcus's jaw tightened. He remembered those years. The expansion, the mergers, the brutal nights when he slept in his office, angry at the world, obsessed with winning. Invisible people moved through his life then, cleaning, fixing, replacing. He had never learned their names. He flipped the page. A disciplinary note. Employee reported accessing restricted floor after hours. Claimed she was instructed to clean executive office. No evidence found. Terminated without incident. Marcus frowned. His office. He read further. Another note. This one handwritten. Employee repeatedly observed executive habits. Reported as odd but harmless. Marcus leaned back slowly. His habits. The elevator buttons. The coffee machine. The numbers he pressed when angry. A memory surfaced him slamming his palm against the keypad late one night, muttering to himself after a failed negotiation. Had she been there, watching, learning, not stealing, listening? Marcus felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Meanwhile, Eliza sat on a bus at the edge of the city, her backpack on her lap, hands clasped tightly together. She wasn't shaking. She had already done that years ago. This today wasn't fear. It was closure. She stared out the window as buildings blurred past, memory surfacing uninvited. Her mother scrubbing floors until her hands cracked. Her father gone before she turned 10. Night shifts because daylight jobs never paid enough. And Marcus Holley's office, the place where everything had changed. She remembered the night clearly. She had been 19, exhausted, invisible as always. She hadn't meant to listen. But when Marcus slammed his fist on the desk and shouted into the empty room, anger spilling out unchecked, she froze behind the glass wall. "You think I don't see you?" he had yelled to someone on the phone. She almost laughed then, because he didn't see anyone. Not really. After that night, she started noticing things, patterns, habits, not to exploit them but to understand how power worked. She studied security systems online, behavioral psychology, patterns of control, not to steal, to survive. When she was fired without explanation, she didn't argue. She learned, she adapted, and today, she returned, not for revenge, for balance. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Then again. She smiled faintly. Back in his office, Marcus stared at his phone. Call failed. Again. Find her location. He barked into the receiver. The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't broken any laws. This could escalate." Marcus cut the call. He stood, walked to the glass wall, and looked down at the city. For the first time in decades, Marcus Hale felt something dangerously close to fear, not of losing money, but of losing the illusion that he was untouchable. Because somewhere out there was a girl he had once ignored, and she knew him better than anyone ever had. And the worst part, he had a feeling she wasn't done yet. Marcus Hale had always believed silence was a weapon. Boardrooms fell quiet when he entered. Executives stopped mid-sentence when he raised a hand. Entire companies waited for him to speak. But this silence, this one, felt different. It pressed against his chest as he stood alone in his penthouse, the city glowing beneath him, a conquered kingdom. Eliza Moore had not answered. Not his calls, not his messages, not even the carefully worded apology his assistant had drafted and redrafted, until it sounded human. Marcus loosened his tie, something he rarely did, and poured himself a drink he didn't touch. 10 seconds. That was all it had taken for everything to shift. 10 seconds of her standing in front of his open safe. 10 seconds of her calm smile. 10 seconds of him realizing power could be observed, studied, and dismantled. The next morning, Marcus did something unthinkable. He went back, not to a board meeting, not to a negotiation, but to the basement levels of his own building. The security guards straightened when they saw him, confused by his presence. "Which company cleans this floor?" he asked. The supervisor blinked. "Sir, the night shift. 5 years ago." After a pause, a name was given, then another, then another. Marcus spent the next 3 hours walking through places he had never truly seen: utility corridors, storage rooms, break areas where tired workers once sat with cheap coffee and aching feet. He stopped in front of a small room with chipped paint and flickering lights. A janitor's closet. This was where Eliza had waited sometimes, according to records. This was where she ate her dinner. This was where she hid when executives stayed late. Marcus stood there, suddenly aware of how large the world had always been to him, and how small it must have felt to her. He rested his hand against the wall, and for the first time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt late. Eliza, meanwhile, sat in a small public library 2 towns away, a place that smelled of dust and old paper. She liked libraries. They didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. Her laptop was open, lines of code scrolling slowly, not hacking, not stealing, just analysis, data patterns, corporate loopholes. She wasn't planning revenge. She was planning exposure. Her phone vibrated again. A text this time. Marcus Hale, you were right. I didn't see you. I should have. She stared at the screen. 5 years too late. Another message followed. I don't want this to be a mistake I carry forever. Eliza closed the laptop. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed, Eliza, you already carry it. The question is whether you'll learn from it. She stood, packed her bag, and walked out into the sunlight. That afternoon, Marcus received an email that made his blood run cold. Subject, Hale Financial, Internal Vulnerability Report. Sender, anonymous. Attached was a document 30 pages long. Not theft, not blackmail. A mirror. Security flaws, ethical breaches, employee dismissals quietly settled, patterns of behavior that exposed not just systems, but character. This wasn't a criminal act. It was a public reckoning waiting to happen. Marcus sank into his chair. He understood now. Eliza wasn't after money. She was after truth. And truth, once released, couldn't be locked back into a safe. At exactly 7 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered immediately. Marcus, Eliza's voice said calmly. He exhaled. Eliza, thank you for calling. I didn't call to thank you, she replied. I called to warn you. Warn me about what? Your world only works because people believe it's fair, she said. The moment they stop believing that, it collapses. Marcus closed his eyes. What do you want? There was a pause. Then, I want you to change, she said. Not for me. For the people you'll never notice unless you force yourself to. And if I don't. Her voice didn't harden. It softened. Then I let the truth speak for itself. The call ended. Marcus stared at the dark screen. 10 seconds. That was all it had taken for a poor girl he once mocked, to remind him that power without humanity was the weakest thing of all. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Hale wasn't sure what he would choose next. Marcus Hale didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office long after the city lights dimmed. The vulnerability report open on his screen. Page after page reflected not just corporate weaknesses, but personal ones. Decisions made in haste. Employees dismissed without explanation. Entire lives brushed aside because they didn't register as important. 4 years. Marcus had told himself this was the cost of success. Now, he wasn't so sure. At dawn, he did something no one expected. He cancelled every meeting on his calendar. The board panicked. Investors demanded explanations. His assistant knocked 3 times before finally asking, Sir, is everything all right? Marcus looked up slowly. No, he said, but it's going to be. By noon, an internal memo went out to every employee across Hale Financial. Not written by legal, not filtered by PR, written by Marcus himself. Effective immediately, we are initiating a full internal audit of security, ethics, and employee treatment. This includes leadership starting with me. People stared at their screens in disbelief. Some laughed nervously. Some didn't believe it would last. Others, especially those who had once felt invisible, felt something unfamiliar rise in their chests. Hope. Across town, Eliza watched the news silently from a cafe. She hadn't expected this. She had prepared for denial, for retaliation, for quiet threats wrapped in polite language, not accountability. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus Hale. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to do this right. Eliza took a sip of her coffee, then typed, Eliza, change isn't a statement. It's a pattern. I'll be watching. She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. Weeks passed. Executives were replaced. Policies rewritten. Security systems rebuilt, this time with transparency, not arrogance. Marcus insisted on meeting departments he had never set foot in before. Cleaning staff, maintenance teams, night shift workers. He listened, really listened. Some were skeptical. Some were angry. Some cried. Marcus didn't defend himself. For the first time in his life, he didn't need to win. One evening, he stood in the same conference room where it had all begun. The safe remained, closed, untouched. He stared at it for a long moment, then turned away. Months later, a headline quietly circulated, not viral, not sensational. Hale Financial introduces employee-led oversight model. Buried deep in the article was a single line. The initiative was influenced by an anonymous internal review. Marcus knew who they meant. So did Eliza. They met once more, not in his office, not in a boardroom, on a park bench, just two people sharing silence. You could have taken the money, Marcus said finally. Eliza looked at him. Money only changes who's comfortable. Truth changes who's responsible. He nodded. I mocked you, he said. I treated you like nothing. You treated the world that way. She replied gently. I was just the one who stood in front of you. Marcus exhaled. For what it's worth, he said. You changed me. Eliza stood. Then don't waste it. She walked away. No applause, no reward, no headlines, just impact. Back in his office that night, Marcus removed the watch from his wrist, the one worth more than Eliza had earned in years, and placed it in the safe. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. $500 million had never been the point. 10 seconds had been. 10 seconds of humility. 10 seconds of truth. 10 seconds that proved power isn't what you own. It's what you choose to become. Understood. We'll continue the story beyond the ending as a powerful epilogue arc, not a repeat. When the world found out, Marcus Hale thought the hardest part was choosing to change. He was wrong. The hardest part was what came after. The first article appeared quietly, buried in the business section of an online newspaper. No accusations, no drama, just facts. A billionaire CEO, an anonymous internal report, a sudden restructuring. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Social media exploded with speculation. Former employees began sharing stories, some anonymously, some openly. Stories of being ignored, replaced, dismissed without explanation. None of them mentioned Eliza, but every word carried her shadow. Marcus sat in his office, watching interviews he wasn't part of. Analysts debated whether his actions were genuine or strategic. Commentators argued whether this was redemption or damage control. For the first time in his life, Marcus didn't try to control the narrative. He let it burn. The board wasn't as patient. Emergency meetings were called. Shareholders demanded reassurance. One senior executive slammed his fist on the table. You're letting a ghost run this company, he snapped. You're dismantling decades of authority. Marcus met his gaze calmly. No, he said. I'm dismantling arrogance. That executive resigned the next morning. So did two others. Meanwhile, Eliza watched from a distance. She didn't comment, didn't post, didn't explain. She returned to night classes, picked up freelance work, lived quietly. But something followed her. People. A journalist found her name, but never printed it. A non-profit reached out, asking for consultation. A tech ethics group invited her to speak anonymously. Eliza declined most of it. She hadn't done this to become visible. She had done it so others wouldn't be invisible anymore. Months later, Marcus received a letter. Not an email, not a call. A letter. Inside was a single page. You asked me once what I wanted. This is it. I don't want a seat at your table. I want more tables. Don't thank me. Prove it mattered. No signature. Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. That day, Hale Financial announced a permanent fund quietly, without fanfare, supporting education and security training for low-income workers across multiple industries. No building was named after him. No press conference held. Just action. A year later, Marcus stood in the same lobby where he had once laughed. The same floor, the same doors, different man. He watched a young cleaner badge in, her shoulders tense, eyes cautious. He nodded to her. She hesitated, then nodded back. It wasn't gratitude, it was recognition, and somehow that meant more. Across the city, Eliza stood on a subway platform, reading on her phone. A headline flashed briefly. Hale Financial Profit Stabilize under new employee first model. She closed the app. The train arrived. She stepped inside, unnoticed. Exactly how she preferred it. Some stories end with applause. This one ended with something rarer. Change that stayed. And somewhere in the city, a billionaire and a poor girl who never met, again continued living proof of the same truth. Power can be mocked, money can be offered, but dignity, that must be earned. The girl who started a quiet movement. Eliza never meant to start anything. That was the strangest part of it all. She didn't post a video. She didn't give an interview. She didn't write a manifesto. But change has a way of spreading when it's real. It started with a message from a woman she didn't know. I used to clean offices too. I read what happened at Hale Financial. You made me feel seen for the first time in years. Eliza stared at the screen for a long moment. Then another message arrived. I work night security. Your story made my boss treat us differently. Then another. I'm teaching my daughter to pay attention. Like you did. Eliza felt something tighten in her chest. She had never wanted recognition, but this wasn't that. This was resonance. Across the country, small things began to change. A hospital revised how it treated overnight staff. A tech startup redesigned security access after an internal review. A university invited janitorial workers to safety briefings for the first time. No one mentioned Eliza by name. But the pattern was there. People were looking down less and looking around more. Marcus noticed it too, not in headlines but in meetings. Executives began asking different questions. Who actually uses this system? Who sees this after hours? What happens when we ignore the bottom layer? Questions he had never once asked himself. One afternoon, during a routine walkthrough, Marcus stopped in front of a whiteboard someone had left behind. Written in marker were the words, "Power isn't loud, it's observant." Marcus recognized the sentence immediately. He didn't erase it. Eliza eventually agreed to one thing. A private workshop. No cameras, no press, no names. Just a room full of people from different industries: cleaners, guards, assistants, junior analysts. People who were always present and rarely heard. She stood at the front, nervous for the first time in years. "I'm not here because I'm special," she said. "I'm here because I paid attention when no one thought I mattered." She didn't talk about Marcus. She didn't talk about the money. She talked about patterns, about listening, about how systems reveal their weakest points to those who are ignored. By the end of the session, no one clapped. They just sat there, thinking. That night, Eliza walked home alone. The city hummed around her. unaware of how many lives quietly intersected beneath its noise. She thought about her mother, about the nights spent cleaning floors that gleamed for other people's success, about the younger version of herself, who had once believed invisibility was a curse. She understood now. Invisibility was a position, and from that position, she had seen everything. Months later, Marcus received a final update from compliance. Employee retention had improved. Security incidents had dropped. Trust, something no reports could quantify, had slowly begun to rebuild. He closed the file and leaned back. For the first time, success didn't feel like conquest. It felt like responsibility. Somewhere else in the city, Eliza sat on a bus, backpack at her feet, watching people pass by. No one recognized her. No one needed to. She had never wanted the world to know her name. She had only wanted the world to change how it looked at people like her. And quietly, it had. The moment she almost stepped forward, years passed. Quietly, the world moved on the way it always does, fast, loud, distracted. New scandals replaced old ones. New billionaires rose. New heroes were manufactured and forgotten just as quickly. But some changes didn't announce themselves. They settled in. Eliza noticed it first in small, almost invisible ways. A security guard at a corporate building stopped her and asked politely if she needed help instead of assuming she didn't belong. A cleaner at a university spoke up during a safety meeting and wasn't interrupted. A young intern thanked the overnight staff by name. None of this would ever make the news, but Eliza felt it, like a slow shift in gravity. One evening, she received an invitation that unsettled her more than she expected. Subject: keynote speaker, Human-Centered Security Symposium. She almost deleted it. Keynote meant stage. Stage meant visibility. Visibility meant losing the quiet power she had protected so carefully. She closed her laptop, but the words stayed with her. Human-centered. It wasn't about her. It was about the idea. That night, she dreamed of the vault again. The safe wasn't locked this time. It stood open, empty, not because it had been robbed, but because it no longer needed to be sealed. She woke before dawn. Marcus Hale read the same symposium program 2 weeks later. He recognized the theme immediately. Human-centered systems, ethics through observation, security built from the ground up. He knew who had inspired it. He wondered briefly if she would be there, then dismissed the thought. Some people change the world precisely because they never step into the spotlight. Eliza arrived late. She sat in the back row, hoodie pulled low, notebook in hand. Speaker after speaker took the stage. Professors, executives, consultants. They used polished words, but Eliza heard the gaps. They talked about systems. She thought about people inside them. Then the moderator announced the final segment. A special address, he said, from someone who asked us to remain unnamed. A pause. We only know her as Observer. Eliza's breath caught. She hadn't agreed to this. The lights dimmed. A voice not hers began reading from a prepared statement. The strongest systems are not the most complex. They are the ones that assume everyone is paying attention, even those you don't notice. The room fell silent. If your power depends on being unseen by those below you, it isn't power, it's fragility. Eliza felt her heart pound. This wasn't exposure, it was translation. Someone had understood. As the reading ended, there was no applause at first. Then slowly people stood, not cheering, standing, respectfully. Eliza stayed seated, but something inside her shifted. Later, outside the building, a young woman approached her. I don't know why, the woman said nervously, but I feel like you understand this better than anyone. Eliza studied her face. The fear, the hunger to be seen. She thought of herself at 19. I do, Eliza said gently. The woman smiled, and just like that, Eliza understood. She didn't need to speak to crowds. She needed to speak to one person at a time. That same night, Marcus stood alone on his balcony, city lights stretching endlessly. He had watched the symposium online. He recognized the words, not because they were familiar, but because they had changed him. He poured a drink, then pushed it aside untouched. He thought about the safe, about the laugh that had cost him certainty, about the 10 seconds that rewired everything. For the first time, he didn't feel haunted by that moment. He felt grateful for it. Across the city, Eliza walked home beneath flickering streetlights. She passed offices being cleaned for tomorrow's workday. She caught her reflection in a dark window. Older now, stronger, still invisible, but no longer small. She realized something that surprised her. She wasn't running from visibility anymore. She was choosing when to use it, and that choice, that was real power. When silence finally spoke, Eliza didn't expect the call. She was in a small community center on the edge of the city, helping a group of night workers learn basic digital security, how to protect their identities, how to spot surveillance, how to understand the systems that watched them more than they watched back. Her phone vibrated. A known number. She hesitated, then answered. Eliza Moore, a familiar voice said. Calm but careful. She closed her eyes for a brief second. Marcus Hale, she replied. You found me later than I expected. I didn't want to, he said honestly. But I think I owe you something. She stepped outside, the noise of the room fading behind her. You don't owe me, she said. You already paid the price. The rest was your choice. There was a pause on the line, not awkward, heavy. I'm stepping down, Marcus said. That made her stop walking. From what? She asked. From being the final authority, he replied. I'll remain, but I won't rule. The company is moving to shared oversight, independent ethics board, worker representation, real power sharing. Eliza leaned against the wall, absorbing it. That's not easy, she said. No, Marcus agreed, but neither was learning that my empire was built on people I never saw. Another pause. I'm not calling for approval, he added. I just wanted you to know it wasn't temporary. Eliza looked up at the sky. Grey clouds, no drama, just weather. Good, she said. Then it'll last. After the call, Eliza stayed where she was for a long time. She thought about the girl. She had been the one who learned patterns because it was safer than speaking. The one who memorized behavior because power rarely listened. She had never imagined this outcome. Not reform, not reflection, not a billionaire choosing humility over dominance. And yet here it was. Not perfect, but real. The news broke quietly. No scandal headline, no public apology tour. Just a short announcement buried under market updates. Hale Financial announces permanent shift to shared governance. The reaction was mixed. Some called it weakness. Others called it overdue. Eliza didn't read the comments. She didn't need validation. She had already seen what mattered change. Weeks later, she received one final message. No name, no number, just a sentence. I see them now. She deleted it, not out of anger, out of closure. On a cold morning months later, Eliza stood at a train station, watching people rush past. A young man in a suit held a door open for a cleaner. A manager stopped to thank a guard. Small things, but real. She smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just enough. High above the city, Marcus Hale stood in the same office he once ruled like a throne. The safe was gone. In its place stood a long table. People sat around it. Different roles, different backgrounds, equal voices. Marcus listened more than he spoke. For the first time, leadership felt like service, not control. He glanced at the city beyond the glass. Somewhere in it walked the person who had undone him, not with force, but with attention. Eliza boarded her train. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection one last time. Still invisible, but no longer unheard, and she realized something she had never allowed herself to believe before. She didn't just change one man, she changed the direction of a system, and the world would never fully notice how, which meant she had done it right. The 10 seconds that lived forever. Time has a strange way of smoothing the edges of even the sharpest moments. Years passed. People forgot the headlines they never fully read. Companies rebranded. New CEOs rose. New scandals demanded attention. The world, as always, moved forward without stopping to remember how quietly it had once been redirected. But some moments do not fade. They live on not in memory, but in behavior. Eliza Moore never became famous. She never stood on a stage under bright lights, never wrote a book, never gave a viral interview. Instead, she became something rarer, a reference point. In classrooms where ethics were taught, her story was mentioned without a name. In security trainings, her methods were studied without a face. In leadership circles, a phrase began to circulate: assume the unseen is watching. No one knew where it came from, but it changed how people acted. On a quiet morning, Eliza walked through a city park on her way to work. She had taken a position advising community organizations, nothing glamorous, nothing public. She preferred it that way. A young girl sat on a bench nearby, staring at a tablet with frustrated focus. Can't figure it out, Eliza asked gently. The girl shook her head. Eliza sat beside her, pointing at the screen. Sometimes the answer isn't hidden, she said. It's just overlooked. The girl's eyes lit up as the solution appeared. Whoa, she said. How did you know? Eliza smiled. I pay attention. She stood and walked away before the girl could ask her name. Across the city, Marcus Hale prepared to leave his office for the last time. Not in disgrace, not in triumph, in completion. He walked slowly through the halls past people who nodded, not out of fear, but respect. Past offices where doors were open, past conversations he wasn't meant to dominate. He stopped at the place where the safe once stood. There was nothing there now, just a window. Marcus placed his hand against the glass. 10 seconds. That was all it had taken for his life to fracture and reform. 10 seconds that taught him the most valuable lesson of all. Power does not belong to those who own the vault. It belongs to those who notice the room. As Marcus stepped into the elevator, he caught his reflection. Older, quieter, lighter. The doors closed. That evening, Eliza sat at her small desk, reviewing notes from the day. She paused, pen hovering, then wrote a single sentence at the top of a blank page. She closed the notebook. Outside, the city glowed, millions of lives intersecting, most of them unseen, all of them important. Eliza turned off the light and walked into the night. No applause followed her, no recognition, just a quiet certainty that somewhere, in a boardroom, or a hallway, or a forgotten basement corridor, someone would hesitate before mocking a person they didn't understand, because of 10 seconds, and that was enough.